He pointed toward a nearby window. Outside stood a large tree. Imagine planting a seed. Everyone looked outside. For a while, nothing appears to happen. No branches, no leaves, no visible progress. Daniel nodded. But beneath the surface, roots are growing. Keanu smiled gently. The tree becomes strong before it becomes visible. The words settled over the room. Then Will added something unexpected. And sometimes, he said, the strongest people are the ones growing roots nobody can see. Daniel didn't respond immediately. But something in his expression changed, a slight shift, a quiet understanding. Hope rarely arrives as a dramatic transformation. Often it arrives as a single sentence, a new perspective, a reason to continue. The visit lasted several more hours. By the end, Keanu and Will understood something clearly. Saving the center mattered, but simply writing checks would not solve the larger problem. The challenge was sustainability. The challenge was creating a future. That evening they gathered with staff members, educators, volunteers, and community leaders. Together they brainstormed ideas, partnerships, programs, fundraising initiatives, scholarship opportunities, mentorship networks. Everyone contributed. Everyone participated. And gradually, a plan emerged. Not a perfect plan, not an easy plan, but a realistic one. A path forward. The following months became a remarkable example of collective effort. Local businesses became involved. Volunteers increased. Former students returned to help. Community members organized events. Teachers expanded outreach programs. Momentum grew. The center survived, then stabilized, then expanded. Yet the most remarkable transformation wasn't financial. It was emotional. People began believing in their own ability to create change. The crisis revealed something powerful. Communities become strongest when responsibility is shared. No single hero saved the center. Hundreds of people did. Together. Meanwhile, Daniel continued attending regularly. He studied harder than ever. Not because his circumstances had magically improved, because his mindset had. He still faced obstacles. Still encountered setbacks, still experienced uncertainty, but he no longer interpreted difficulty as proof of failure. He understood that roots often grow unseen. Years passed. Life continued. Students graduated. New students arrived. Programs evolved. Dreams expanded. The community center became stronger than ever. One autumn afternoon, nearly 7 years after the financial crisis, a special anniversary celebration took place. Former students traveled from across the country to attend. Families gathered. Teachers reunited. Volunteers shared memories. The atmosphere felt joyful, grateful, meaningful. Among the attendees was Daniel, no longer 16, now a confident young professional. He had accomplished many of the goals he once considered impossible. Not because life became easy, because he refused to quit. Late in the evening, organizers invited several guests to share reflections. Teachers spoke, volunteers spoke, former students spoke. Then Daniel approached the stage. The room quieted. Many remembered him as the quiet teenager who rarely spoke. Now he stood confidently before hundreds of people. He smiled, then began. When I was 16, I asked a question. The audience listened. I asked, what happens when you work hard and nothing seems to change? Several people nodded. Daniel continued. At the time, I believed success meant visible progress. He paused. Better grades, more opportunities, faster results. The room remained silent. Then someone told me about roots. A few audience members smiled knowingly. Daniel looked around. I didn't fully understand the lesson back then. His voice softened. But I understand it now. He gestured toward the crowd. This room is full of roots. People exchanged curious glances. The teachers who stayed late. The volunteers who showed up. The mentors who encouraged us. The staff members who believed in us. The families who sacrificed for us. Emotion filled his voice. They changed lives long before anyone noticed. The audience became completely silent. Daniel continued, "And that's when I learned something." He paused, perhaps the most important pause of the evening, then spoke slowly. "The greatest impact you'll ever have may be invisible to you." The room seemed frozen. Every person listened. Every person reflected. Every person recognized someone who had quietly shaped their journey. Daniel smiled. "You may never know whose life improved because of your kindness. You may never know who found hope because of your encouragement. You may never know who kept going because you believed in them." He looked across the audience. But that doesn't make the impact any less real. Several people wiped tears from their eyes, even some teachers, even some volunteers, even people who rarely showed emotion, because they understood. Many had spent years helping others without recognition, years giving effort without applause, years planting seeds they might never see grow. Daniel's words honored those sacrifices. When he finished, the audience rose to its feet, not for fame, not for status, not for celebrity, for truth. The applause continued for nearly a minute. Afterward, people gathered throughout the hall sharing stories. Stories of encouragement, stories of resilience, stories of individuals who changed lives through seemingly small actions. Later that evening, Keanu and Will stood outside beneath a sky filled with stars. The celebration had ended. The parking lot had nearly emptied. A cool breeze moved through the night air. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Will smiled. "Remember that television show?" Keanu laughed. "Which part?" "The part where I kept challenging you." They both laughed. Will shook his head. "I thought success was something you proved." Keanu listened. Will continued. "Now I think it's something you build." "What do you mean?" "A life, a reputation, a character, a legacy." He looked toward the building. "And you build it one decision at a time." Keanu nodded. The silence that followed felt comfortable, peaceful. Then Will asked one final question. "Do you know what leaves people speechless?" Keanu smiled. "What?" Will looked toward the community center, toward the students, toward the teachers, toward the lives forever connected by a chain of kindness stretching across years. Then he answered, "Not success, not fame, not talent." He paused. "The realization that one act of kindness can travel farther than you'll ever see." Neither spoke afterward. They didn't need to. Some lessons are too meaningful for additional words. Above them, the stars continued shining. Inside the building, lights slowly turned off one by one. And somewhere in the future, students not yet born would benefit from choices made by people who simply cared enough to help. That is the strange beauty of kindness. Its greatest victories often happen beyond our sight. Its most important rewards cannot be measured, and its legacy continues long after the moment itself has passed. Because in the end, people rarely remember every achievement. They rarely remember every headline. They rarely remember every award, but they never forget how someone made them feel. And sometimes the most extraordinary thing a person can do is remind another human being that they matter. That reminder changes lives. And those changed lives go on to change others, creating a legacy far greater than fame, far greater than recognition, far greater than applause. A legacy built not on being admired, but on helping others believe in themselves. The spotlight test. The city lights shimmered like scattered diamonds beneath the evening sky. Thousands of people filled the streets around the television studio, hoping to catch a glimpse of their favorite celebrities as luxury cars rolled toward the red carpet. Inside the building, producers rushed through hallways carrying clipboards, camera operators checked their equipment, and assistants moved from room to room preparing for one of the most anticipated live television specials of the year. The program, was called Voices of Success, a global broadcast where famous actors, musicians, entrepreneurs, and athletes gathered to discuss their journeys and inspire millions of viewers. Among the invited guests was Keanu Reeves. Despite decades of success, Keanu remained one of the most respected figures in the entertainment world. People admired not only his achievements, but also his reputation for kindness. Stories of his generosity often circulated online, though he rarely spoke about them himself. That evening, however, something felt different. As Keanu stepped out of a black vehicle and greeted fans, he noticed a strange energy among the media representatives gathered near the entrance. Whispers, side glances, unexpected smiles. It was subtle, but noticeable. Still, he simply nodded politely and continued inside. Backstage, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Several guests chatted while makeup artists made final adjustments before the broadcast. Across the room stood Will Smith, another highly successful entertainer known around the world. Will was surrounded by a small group of guests who laughed as he told stories and joked with everyone nearby. When he noticed Keanu entering, he raised a hand. "Keanu!" he called. Keanu smiled and walked over. "Good to see you." "You too," Will replied. The exchange was friendly, but something about Will's expression seemed unusually competitive. Not hostile, just curious, as though he were trying to solve a puzzle. For years, media outlets had often compared the two stars. Both had built remarkable careers. Both had overcome obstacles. Both had earned devoted audiences. But while many celebrities actively sought attention, Keanu seemed almost allergic to it. He rarely boasted, rarely defended himself, rarely responded to criticism. That mystery fascinated people. And apparently, it fascinated Will too. A producer approached the group. 5 minutes, everyone." The guests began moving toward the stage. The studio audience erupted into applause as lights illuminated the massive set. Music thundered through the room. The host walked onto the stage and welcomed viewers from around the world. One by one, the guests were introduced. Each received enthusiastic applause. When Keanu's name was announced, the audience reaction became especially loud, not because he was the biggest celebrity present, but because there was something uniquely warm about how people responded to him. The host noticed it too. "Wow," she laughed. "That's a lot of love." Keanu simply smiled and waved. The discussion began smoothly. Guests shared stories about their careers. They discussed challenges, failures, successes, and lessons learned. For nearly an hour, everything proceeded normally. Then the conversation shifted. The host introduced a new segment called The Truth Chair. The concept was simple. Guests would answer spontaneous questions from fellow panelists. Nothing was rehearsed, nothing was prepared. The audience loved it because it often revealed surprising insights. The host spun a wheel displaying each guest's name. It landed on Will. "Will," the host said, "you may choose anyone on stage to ask a question." Will looked around dramatically. Then his eyes settled on Keanu. The audience cheered. Will grinned. "I choose Keanu." More applause. Keanu nodded. "All right." Will leaned forward. "Keanu, people always describe you as humble." The audience listened closely. "But I've always wondered something." His tone remained friendly, yet there was an edge beneath the words. "What happens when humility becomes a performance?" The room grew quieter. Several audience members exchanged glances. The question wasn't necessarily rude, but it carried a challenge. Keanu remained calm. "What do you mean?" he asked. Will smiled. "I mean, everyone says you're the nicest guy in Hollywood." A few people laughed. "So tell me honestly." He paused. "Do you ever get tired of living up to that image?" Silence. The camera zoomed in. Millions of viewers watched. It wasn't an attack, but it felt like a test. Many celebrities in similar situations might have become defensive. Others might have offered a carefully polished answer. Keanu simply thought for a moment. Then he spoke. I don't try to live up to an image. The audience listened. I try to live up to my values. The room became still. Will nodded. But people expect perfection from you. They shouldn't, Keanu replied. I'm not perfect. That answer surprised some viewers. The host leaned forward. Can you explain? Keanu smiled slightly. Of course. He looked toward the audience. When people hear positive stories about someone, they sometimes imagine that person has everything figured out. He shook his head. I don't. A few audience members laughed softly. I make mistakes. I have bad days. I get frustrated. I doubt myself. The room remained silent, not uncomfortable, focused. Being kind isn't about being perfect, Keanu continued. It's about choosing kindness again after you've failed at it. Several people applauded. Will crossed his arms thoughtfully. But he wasn't finished. The host noticed. You seem to have another question. Will nodded. I do. He looked directly at Keanu. If success disappeared tomorrow, every movie, every award, every dollar, who would you be? A murmur swept through the audience. This question landed harder. The challenge was unmistakable now. Some viewers might have interpreted it as an attempt to corner Keanu, others saw simple curiosity. Either way, all eyes were on him. Keanu leaned back. He seemed completely unbothered. Then he answered. I'd still be a student. The audience looked puzzled. A student? The host asked. Yes. Of what? Keanu smiled. Life. The audience laughed warmly, but he continued. Success teaches you some things. Failure teaches you others. Loss teaches you different lessons. Love teaches you different lessons. He paused. No matter what happens, there's always something left to learn. A wave of applause spread across the studio. Even the host seemed impressed. Still, Will wasn't satisfied. Not because he disliked Keanu, because he genuinely wanted to understand him. Some people are intrigued when they encounter someone who refuses to play the usual game of ego and competition. The segment continued. Questions moved to other guests. Yet the atmosphere had changed. Everyone sensed an unspoken tension, not hostility, curiosity, a desire to see what would happen next. During a commercial break, the guests left their chairs. Crew members adjusted equipment. The audience chatted excitedly. Backstage, several people approached Keanu. Great answer. You handled that well. That was impressive. Keanu thanked them politely. Then he walked alone toward a quiet hallway, away from the noise, away from the cameras, away from the attention. There he found a young production assistant sitting on a storage box. The assistant looked upset. His eyes were fixed on the floor. Keanu stopped. You all right? The young man looked startled. Oh, he quickly stood. Sorry. No need to apologize. The assistant hesitated, then sighed. Tonight was supposed to be my big chance. What happened? The young man explained. For nearly 2 years he had worked at the studio. He hoped to become a producer someday. That evening he was supposed to present an idea to a senior executive. But moments before the meeting, he learned the executive had canceled. The opportunity was gone. Months of preparation felt wasted. I know it sounds silly, the assistant said. It doesn't. The young man looked surprised. Keanu sat beside him. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Keanu asked a question. What if this wasn't your chance? The assistant frowned. What do you mean? What if it was your preparation? The young man remained silent. Keanu continued. Sometimes we think one moment determines everything. He looked down the hallway. But often the moment we lose isn't the important part. It's who we become while preparing for it. The assistant listened carefully. I spent months getting ready. Then those months weren't wasted. The young man stared ahead. For the first time, his expression softened. Before returning to the stage, Keanu added one final thought. The world notices people who keep showing up. Then he walked away. The assistant would remember those words for years. Back on stage, the live broadcast resumed. The final segment featured audience questions. A woman stood near the front row. She appeared nervous. The host smiled encouragingly. "What would you like to ask?" The woman looked directly at Keanu. "My question is for you." He nodded. She took a deep breath. "How do you stay hopeful after disappointment?" The studio became silent once more. Many people expected a simple answer. Instead, Keanu remained thoughtful. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he spoke quietly. "When I was younger, I thought hope meant believing everything would work out." The audience listened closely. "Now I think hope is different." He paused. "I think hope means believing life is still worth living, even when things don't work out." The room became completely still. Anyone can feel hopeful when everything is going their way. He looked around. The real challenge comes when plans fall apart. When dreams change. When people leave. When doors close. The woman nodded slowly. Keanu continued. "Hope isn't pretending pain doesn't exist. It's deciding pain won't have the final word." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then applause erupted throughout the studio. Not the loud applause reserved for jokes or dramatic moments, a different kind, a sincere kind, the kind that comes W. The invisible audience 3 days had passed since the live television special. Clips from the show spread rapidly across social media. Millions of people discussed the conversation, especially the unexpected exchange between Keanu and Will. Some viewers praised Keanu's calm responses. Others debated the meaning behind his answers. Many focused on one particular quote. "Hope isn't pretending pain doesn't exist. It's deciding pain won't have the final word." The sentence appeared everywhere. News articles referenced it. Motivational pages reposted it. Teachers shared it with students. Parents discussed it with their children. Yet while the world analyzed the broadcast, Keanu had already moved on. Fame had taught him something important long ago. The world often celebrates moments. Life is shaped by habits. Moments create headlines. Habits create character. So while millions replayed the interview, Keanu quietly returned to his normal routine. He read books. He attended meetings. He prepared for upcoming projects. Most importantly, he continued observing people. That had always been one of his favorite activities. Not judging them, not studying them, simply noticing them. The elderly man who smiled at strangers, the exhausted waitress working a double shift, the student reading textbooks on a crowded train, the father carrying groceries and a sleeping child at the same time. Every person carried a story. Most stories were invisible, and invisible stories fascinated him. One rainy afternoon, Keanu entered a small coffee shop located several blocks away from a busy downtown district. It wasn't famous. It wasn't trendy. Most celebrities would never visit such a place, which was exactly why he liked it. The cafe was quiet, simple, honest. As he entered, he immediately noticed tension in the room. A young employee stood behind the high counter trying desperately to handle a long line of impatient customers. Several workers had apparently called in sick. The employee looked overwhelmed. Orders piled up. Customers grew frustrated. Mistakes happened. Voices became sharper. One customer complained loudly. Another demanded a refund. A third rolled his eyes dramatically. The young employee apologized repeatedly, but nothing seemed to calm the growing irritation. Keanu quietly joined the line. He waited patiently. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. The complaints continued. Finally, one customer slammed his hand on the counter. "This is ridiculous!" The employee looked close to tears. "I apologize, sir." "No," the customer shook his head. "This place is a disaster." Silence filled the room. The employee lowered his eyes. At that moment, Keanu stepped forward, not dramatically, not heroically, simply respectfully. He looked at the frustrated customer. "Looks like he's doing the work of 3 people." The customer frowned. So maybe today deserves patience." The room became quiet. Nobody expected the comment, especially because it wasn't confrontational. There was no anger, no lecture, just perspective. The customer glanced around. For the first time, he seemed to notice the situation more clearly. The exhausted employee, the missing staff, the overflowing orders. His posture softened slightly. The tension began to dissolve. Within minutes, conversations resumed. The atmosphere changed. Not because anyone won an argument, because someone shifted the focus from frustration to understanding. When Keanu finally reached the counter, the young employee looked embarrassed. "Sorry about the wait." Keanu smiled. "No worries." The employee hesitated, then asked quietly, "How do you stay patient when things go wrong?" Keanu thought for a moment, then answered, "I remind myself that I don't know the whole story." The employee looked confused. "What story?" "Anyone's." The young man considered this. Keanu continued, "The person who seems rude may be carrying grief. The person who seems distant may be overwhelmed. The person who seems slow may be struggling." He smiled gently. "We rarely know what chapter someone is living through." The employee nodded. That answer stayed with him long after Keanu left. Across the city, however, someone else was thinking about invisible stories. Will. Since the television special, Keanu's words had remained stuck in his mind, especially one statement. "If I react to every challenge as an attack, I miss the chance to understand the person asking." At first, Will dismissed it. Then he revisited it, again and again. The more he thought about it, the more uncomfortable he became. Not because the statement was wrong, because it forced him to examine himself. Success had brought him many achievements, but it had also brought something else. Pressure. Pressure to remain relevant. Pressure to remain admired. Pressure to remain successful. Pressure to remain extraordinary. Most people saw the accomplishments. Few saw the weight. For years, he had measured himself against expectations, public expectations, industry expectations, personal expectations. The result was exhausting. Even victories sometimes felt temporary. The next challenge always arrived. The next comparison always appeared. The next criticism always emerged. One evening, unable to shake these thoughts, Will decided to take a walk. No security team, no assistants, no entourage, just himself. He wandered through a quiet neighborhood park as the sun began to set. Children played basketball nearby. Families walked dogs. Joggers followed winding paths. Normal life unfolded all around him. For the first time in weeks, he felt strangely relaxed. Then he noticed an older man sitting alone on a bench. The man fed birds while staring toward the horizon. Something about his peaceful expression caught Will's attention. Without fully understanding why, he sat down beside him. For several minutes, neither spoke. Eventually, the older man smiled. "Beautiful evening." "It is." The man nodded. "Most people miss it." Will laughed. "What do you mean?" "They're busy looking ahead." The older man tossed another piece of bread. Always chasing the next thing. Will felt unexpectedly called out. The stranger continued. "Funny thing about life." "What?" "You can spend years climbing a mountain." Will listened, and then discover you forgot to enjoy the view. The words struck harder than expected, not because they were profound, because they were true. The conversation lasted only 10 minutes, yet it left an impression. As Will walked home, he realized something. Wisdom often arrived from unexpected places, not stages, not interviews, not headlines, sometimes from ordinary people sitting on ordinary benches. Meanwhile, another story was quietly unfolding elsewhere. The young production assistant from the television studio, the same one Keanu had encouraged backstage, had not forgotten their conversation. His name was Ethan, and despite his disappointment, he had continued working. Every day, without recognition, without guarantees, without knowing whether his efforts would ever matter. Most people never noticed employees like Ethan, the people behind the scenes. The ones who prepared everything, while others received the spotlight. But Ethan remembered what Keanu had said. The world notices people who keep showing up. At first, he wasn't sure he believed it, yet he kept showing up anyway. Then something unexpected happened. A month after the canceled meeting, a senior producer encountered one of Ethan's project proposals. The producer was impressed, not only by the idea, but by the preparation behind it. Research, planning, problem-solving, professionalism. The producer immediately requested a meeting. Suddenly, the opportunity Ethan thought he had lost returned in an entirely different form, a better form. The meeting went well, then another followed, and another. Within weeks, Ethan found himself contributing to projects he had once only dreamed about. One afternoon, while reviewing production plans, he remembered that lonely hallway conversation. The canceled meeting had felt like failure. Now he realized something. Sometimes life redirects us before it rewards us. The lesson changed everything. Far away, Keanu faced a challenge of his own. Not a public challenge, a private one. A friend from years earlier contacted him unexpectedly. The friend had experienced significant setbacks. Business problems, financial stress, personal disappointments. During their conversation, frustration poured out. Hours of frustration, hours of anger, hours of regret. Most people faced with such negativity would eventually begin offering advice, solutions, corrections, suggestions. Keanu did something different. He listened, truly listened, without interrupting, without trying to fix everything, without making the conversation about himself. After nearly 2 hours, the friend finally stopped speaking. Silence followed. Then the friend asked, "Why haven't you given me advice?" Keanu smiled. "Because that's not what you needed." The friend looked puzzled. "Then what did I need?" "A listener." The friend stared at him. Keanu continued, "Sometimes people don't need answers. They need space." The friend laughed softly. "You might be right." Months later, that friend would describe the conversation as one of the most important of his life, not because of anything Keanu said, because of how fully he listened. Listening. It sounds simple, yet few people truly do it. Most people listen while preparing their next response. Most people listen while waiting for their turn to speak. Few listen with the intention of understanding. Keanu understood that difference, and it shaped every relationship he had. As summer approached, another opportunity emerged. A charity organization invited several public figures to participate in a community event focused on youth mentorship. Will accepted. So did Keanu. Neither knew the other would attend. The event took place at a large community center filled with students from different backgrounds. Some dreamed of becoming artists. Others wanted to become engineers, teachers, entrepreneurs. Athletes. Scientists. The room buzzed with energy. Questions flowed constantly. Stories filled every corner. Late in the afternoon, organizers arranged a panel discussion, and once again, Keanu and Will found themselves sitting on the same stage. This time, however, the atmosphere felt completely different. No television cameras, no ratings, no dramatic segments, just honest conversation. At one point, a teenage student raised her hand. She appeared nervous. "What do you do when you're afraid of failing?" The room grew quiet. The question resonated with everyone. Failure is universal. Every person understands it. The moderator invited Will to answer first. He leaned forward thoughtfully. Several months earlier, he might have responded differently, but recent experiences had changed him. "I used to think failure meant losing." The students listened. "Now, I think failure means refusing to learn. Few heads nodded. Will continued. If something doesn't work, that's information. If a dream changes, that's information. If you make mistakes, that's information. He smiled. The question isn't whether you'll fail. The question is whether you'll grow. Applause spread through the room. Then the moderator turned to Keanu. What would you add? Keanu looked toward the student. I'd say fear and courage often travel together. The room became silent. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward, while fear rides beside you. The student smiled. Many students wrote the sentence down. What happened next surprised everyone, including Keanu, including Will, including the organizers. The student stood. Again, she looked at both men, then asked, "Which one of you is more successful?" The audience laughed. The question felt innocent, but also complicated. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Will surprised everyone. He looked at Keanu, then smiled. Depends how you define success. The audience became quiet. Will continued. When I was younger, success meant achievements. Then it meant recognition. Then it meant influence. He paused. Now I think success means becoming someone you're proud to be when nobody's watching. The room erupted with applause. Keanu smiled. Not because of the answer, because of the growth behind it. Something had changed. The competition was gone. The comparison was gone. In its place stood something far more valuable: understanding, respect, perspective. As the event ended, students lined up for photographs and autographs. Conversations filled the hall. Laughter echoed through the building. Yet among all the excitement, neither Keanu nor Will realized a far greater challenge was approaching. Challenge that would test every lesson discussed so far: patience, humility, hope, kindness, courage, listening, all of it. Because life has a peculiar habit. Just when we believe we've learned the lesson, life presents the examination. And for both men, that examination was about to begin, not under bright lights, not before cheering crowds, but in a place where character matters most. When circumstances become difficult, when expectations disappear, when nobody is keeping score, and neither of them could possibly imagine how much the coming weeks would change their lives. The invisible legacy, the most important moments in life rarely announce themselves. They do not arrive with dramatic music. They do not come with flashing lights. They do not warn us that everything is about to change. Most of the time, they look ordinary. A conversation, a decision, a single act of kindness, a choice that seems small in the moment but grows larger with every passing year. For Keanu Reeves and Will, that moment arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Neither of them knew it. Neither of them expected it. And neither could have imagined how deeply it would affect hundreds of lives. Several weeks had passed since the youth mentorship event. Life had returned to its usual rhythm. Projects continued. Meetings filled calendars. Schedules remained busy, yet something inside both men had changed. The conversations they had shared with students lingered in their minds, especially one question: which one of you is more successful? At first glance, it seemed like a simple question, but the more they reflected on it, the more complicated it became. What truly defines success? Money, fame, awards, influence, or something else entirely? The question followed them everywhere. One afternoon, Will received a message from the organizer of the community center, where the mentorship event had taken place. The message was brief, urgent. The center faced serious financial difficulties. Funding had unexpectedly disappeared. Programs were being canceled. Staff, members feared closure. If nothing changed soon, hundreds of students would lose access to educational resources, mentorship programs, and after-school opportunities. Will read the message twice, then 3 times. The situation troubled him. He remembered the students, their enthusiasm, their dreams, their determination. The idea of losing that support felt wrong. Without hesitation, he called the organizer. The news was worse than he expected. The center had become a lifeline for many families. Students came there for Tutoring.guidance, friendship.safety, hope. Closing the center would affect far more than a BI. Building it would affect futures. That evening, Will found himself thinking about the problem non-stop. Eventually, he called Keanu. "Do you have a minute?" Of course. Will explained everything: the financial crisis, the risk of closure, the students, the families, the urgency. When he finished speaking, silence filled the line. Then Keanu asked a simple question: what do they need most right now? The organizer had asked the same question earlier. Not money, not publicity, not attention. What they needed first was time. Time to develop a long-term solution, time to reorganize, resources, time to prevent immediate shutdown. Keanu listened carefully, then replied, "Let's go visit." 2 days later, they arrived at the community center. No media announcements, no public statements, no cameras, just two people seeking understanding. Before action, the building looked exactly as they remembered. Students filled classrooms, volunteers moved through hallways, teachers worked tirelessly. Yet beneath the activity existed an unmistakable uncertainty. People were worried. The staff welcomed them warmly. Soon, they began touring the facility. They visited tutoring rooms, art workshops, computer labs, study halls. Everywhere they went, students shared their dreams. One wanted to become a doctor, another hoped to become an architect, a third dreamed of starting a business, a fourth wanted to teach. Their ambitions were inspiring, but something else stood out. Many students spoke about the center itself, not just what they learned there, what it meant to them: a safe place, a second home, a source of encouragement, a reminder that someone believed in them. That realization hit both men hard. The center wasn't merely a program, it was a community, and communities are difficult to replace. Near the end of the visit, they met a quiet 16-year-old named Daniel. Unlike many students, Daniel didn't speak much. He remained near the back of the room, observing, listening, thinking. Eventually, one of the teachers encouraged him to join the conversation. Daniel hesitated, then approached slowly. "Can I ask something?" "Of course," Keanu said. Daniel looked down briefly, then met their eyes. "What happens when you work hard and things still don't change?" The room became silent. The question carried weight, not theoretical. Weight. Personal weight. Daniel explained that his family faced constant challenges: financial difficulties, housing, uncertainty, responsibilities beyond his years. He studied hard, helped whenever possible, yet progress felt painfully slow. Sometimes he wondered whether effort mattered. No one spoke immediately. The honesty of the question demanded sincerity. Finally, Keanu answered, "There were times in my life when I felt that way too." Daniel listened closely. Keanu continued, "One of the hardest truths about growth is that it often becomes visible long after it begins." The room remained silent.